President Trump is also advancing his peace through strength policy with airstrikes and diplomacy. We are speaking with Medal of Honor recipient David Bellavita on the latest overseas. But first, we begin with Madeline Rivera live in Washington with the latest on those migrant deportations, causing a whole lot of controversy and interest. Maddie, good morning to you.
Good morning, Carly and Todd. So today, President Trump is thanking the president of El Salvador. The country's leader posted this video on X showing what he said were more than 200 Tren de Aragua members arriving in El Salvador over the weekend. He says they were transferred to a terrorism confinement center for 1 year. A senior Trump administration official tells our Bill Malugin 261 illegal aliens were deported to El Salvador on Saturday. Of those, 137 were removed via the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. This wartime authority gives the president the power to deport non-citizens without a judicial hearing. The act has only been invoked 3 other times in American history. On Saturday, a federal judge ordered the Trump administration to stop the deportations to see if its invocation was legal. But the White House says 2 planes carrying alleged Venezuelan gang members were already in international airspace when the judge's ruling came down, so they argue they did not defy a court order. The president is justifying the use of the act.
These were bad people. That was a bad group of, as I say, hombres. Well, this is a time of war because Biden allowed millions of people, many of them criminals, many of them at the highest level. They emptied jails out. Other nations emptied their jails into the United States. That's an invasion.
President Trump also says his teams have been busy over the weekend trying to narrow the gaps between Ukraine and Russia. And he says a lot of progress has been made, leading to a potential conversation with Russian President Vladimir Putin as soon as tomorrow.
I'll be speaking to President Putin on Tuesday. And a lot of work's been done over the weekend. We want to see if we can bring that war to an end. Maybe we can, maybe we can't, but I think we have a very good chance.
Happening today, the president, who is now the chairman of the Kennedy Center, is expected to meet with its board. Carly and Todd, back to you.
Madeline Rivera kicking us off here on a Monday. Maddie, thank you. Let's bring in constitutional law attorney Katie Cherkasky. And Katie, let's focus on these flights under the Alien Enemies Act. The judge ordered the planes to turn around. The White House says too late. The plane was already out of U.S. airspace. Who's right, Katie?
Well, the timing of the judge's order makes it a little difficult to practically comply with that. Obviously, I think that there are legal questions that need to be analyzed about the use of this act, but I think that the administration has a very strong legal argument and that it does seem to be invoked in a proper way here to get rid of designated gang members. Not really sure who's looking to keep them here and why they're so desperate for that. But certainly, I think that in the big picture of this, the administration has a very strong argument.
So let's talk about the use of the act, shall we? It's used to deport gang members in this instance. That is a unique use of it, and I think we could all agree with that. But this is another example of a lower court judge in our country trying to stop President Trump. If this goes to the Supreme Court, Katie, how do you expect them to rule both on the use of this act and on this bigger question of lower court judges usurping the executive authority of the president, especially when it comes to national security?
Well, it's a very good question. I think ultimately the Supreme Court will have to weigh in on this because the act has only been used a few times in the past and usually during actual times of declared war. But the language of the actual law allows the president very broad discretion to remove what they call alien enemies when there's either a declared war or some other type of incursion or invasion. Typically, that might be considered to be by another nation state. But in this case, Tren de Aragua does operate somewhat under the authority of the Venezuelan regime there, at least according to the administration. And so I think that the president has a good argument here, but the actual Supreme Court interpretation of this is going to likely be needed to ensure that this can be used for this particular type of purpose, because it hasn't been used against a specified group like this in the past. But I think it's a very good use of the law, frankly.
And that's an important point that you made. We also need to do a quick Supreme Court primer here. Basically, the Supreme Court decides a lot of things that haven't really had to come to them before. And this is one of those instances because, to your point, Katie, we haven't really used the Alien Enemies Act that much since our founding. So this could be one of those situations where the Supreme Court gets to decide the president's interpretation of this versus lower court's interpretation and make new law for our country going forward. It's going to be fascinating to watch. Before we let you go, the president sounding off on President Biden's possible use of the autopen when it came to signing pardons. Listen.
But I would say that they're null and void, because I'm sure Biden didn't have any idea that it was taking place. And somebody was using an autopen to sign off and to give pardons. I don't think Biden knew anything about it. And what they did is they deleted and destroyed all of the information that took them over a year to get. And the reason they did that is because the information was very incriminating about them.
Katie, let's say for argument's sake that is true. Could these pardons be invalidated if it is ultimately determined that Biden did not knowingly sign them?
Well, it's certainly a clever argument, but I think that some of these pardons were so broad and unprecedented that the only way to determine the legality of them, I suppose, would be to attempt to charge some of those folks and have a court weigh in on that. The use of the autopen has expanded over the history of the presidency, it seems. And so certainly there's not a specific law that says there's certain acts that can't be used with the autopen. But there is a concern, certainly, when you have a president that was determined to not be able to stand trial, for instance, signing all of these very heavy documents. So something to look into, and perhaps another ground to challenge some of those very unprecedented pardons anyhow.
Katie Cherkasky, thanks for your time. Thanks for getting up with us here. Appreciate it.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.